Hey and welcome to today's in-depth review of the brand new 2023 edition of the Gigabyte AORUS 15. In today's video we will go really pretty deep into the details of this laptop, but I also have a more shallow, short review of the laptop if you're not interested in numbers and benchmarks and just want to know if the laptop is any good and if it will be the right laptop for you. And you can find that over here. But stay tuned, this is an exciting machine in my opinion for a lot of reasons. Okay, the specific AORUS 15 we're testing today will be one of the cheapest versions of this laptop, and it comes with an Intel i5 12500H with 4 performance and 8 E-cores, as well as the 140 watt version of the RTX 4060 with 8 GB VRAM, which in reality won't exceed 85 to 95 watt in gaming due to a voltage limit that these mobile GPUs now seem to have. There will also be versions with up to an RTX 4070 and a recent Intel i7 of the 13th generation. And don't mix it up with the AORUS 15X, that's a slightly different laptop overall. So this model here comes with only 8 GB of DDR5 4800 MHz RAM, which is of course way too small in 2023. But I will also show you on how to open it, upgrade the RAM and install a second M.2 drive. Since additional 8 GB start at only $20 to $25 nowadays, Gigabyte really shouldn't have opted for an 8 GB version in my opinion. But I also upgraded the RAM and will provide you with gaming and workload benchmarks for both 8 and also 16 GB of RAM. Furthermore, in this case, we're getting an amazing 360Hz Full HD IPS screen with a decent maximum brightness of 320 nits and a great color accuracy of 100% sRGB, 71% NTSC and 77% Adobe RGB. That is pretty good in this price category for a gaming laptop. But of course, this monitor will also be built into some of the higher priced models, so it kind of makes sense. Be aware that there will be at least 3 different types of monitors for the AORUS 15 this year, so yours could be different. Unfortunately, this one does not offer G-Sync or adaptive sync, and the installed battery is pretty huge with 99 watt-hours for this model. And here's a quick look at the spec sheet of the laptop. Just pause the video for a moment if you need more details. Well, as of today, this version is one of the cheapest versions and starts at around $1,100 to $1,200, though the top builds go up to almost $2,000. In Europe, this one costs about 1,150 euros and 116,000 rupees in India. I also found an RTX 4050 version on Newegg for $1,050, though in my opinion the 4060 is worth the $100 upgrade if you can afford it. And compared to the prices of the first 4060 laptops we saw in March and April, this is much more reasonable. Before we talk about the build quality, I just wanted to quickly mention that the packaging and the way the laptop is presented is at least a bit above the average experience you see in gaming laptops that come in this price category. Okay, so the build quality of the AORUS 15 is mostly very good, with the Vanderbilt top being the only exception, but that is mostly due to the fact that it's pretty thin overall. The top and the bottom are metal covered, whereas the area around the keyboard is of a high quality plastic. It has a total height of only 21 mm when closed and weighs a total of 2.4 kg due to its beefy and very capable cooling system. The 240 watt AC adapter weighs an additional 710 gram, resulting in 3.1 kg in total. The design is kind of subtle, but definitely gamerish at the same time, while also providing a nice RGB LED stripe beneath the lower display bevel, which by the way can be configured separately. It's a completely different design and setup compared to last year's AORUS 15. You can easily open the display with one hand and the hinge feels nice, though the maximum angle is very narrow due to this protruding Legion 5 type part at the back. The laptop does not come with a lot of bloatware pre-installed. We're basically only getting the mandatory Gigabyte control center, which you should not deinstall at any cost as it's responsible for fan speed and performance modes, as well as the mux switch. And then we're getting 2 DTS apps, one of which is mandatory as well for good sound, and a so-called Dragon LAN app for monitoring network traffic, which you could absolutely get rid of, I guess. So no antivirus software. We would all deinstall after first boot anyway. Oh, and speaking of the first boot, it took quite some time to get all the Gigabyte and Windows updates that are available in the beginning. So the keyboard has 3 RGB zones that can be configured with the Gigabyte control center to your liking. It's a pretty thin chiclet keyboard with a key travel of only 1.7mm and has no numpad, unfortunately. I personally prefer higher keys and a numpad, but the keyboard seems to be built pretty good overall. The touchpad was very slick and at a good position, but the needed click force was way too high for my taste. I'm pretty sure that in situations in which you need to do a lot of clicking, it will actually be exhausting for your fingers and your wrist. It really is that strong. You need a force of around at least 350 grams if I'm not mistaken. The Gigabyte AORUS 15 offers a pretty good set of connections. Starting at the left side, we're getting a USB 3.0 Type A port and the 3.5mm audio jack. At the back, we're having the power connector, an HDMI 2.1 port, a mini display 1.4 port, a USB-C port with Thunderbolt 4.0 and power delivery. And yes, you can charge the laptop with up to 100 watt over this port. And then we have the 2.5 gigabit LAN connector as well. On the right side, we are getting an additional USB-C 3.1 port and 2 USB 3.2 Type A ports. That's a pretty impressive total of 5 USB 3 ports plus 2 additional ports for external monitors. The speakers can get very loud and the sound is okay if you activate the DTS profile via the pre-installed DTS software. Otherwise, it's too flat. Of course, we are not getting a lot of bass and there has been some vibration sound on the left side of the laptop in certain situations. The integrated 1080p camera actually offers Windows Hello for logging in, which worked pretty flawlessly for me. Oh, and by the way, this is what the integrated camera looks like and the integrated microphone sounds like. The Gigabyte control center allows you to configure fan speed and performance modes to your liking. You can choose between several profiles which combine power levels and fan speeds, but you can also just freely combine them and even adjust the fan speed totally manually. And this actually works really good. You can really adjust the laptop to different situations. Call me impressed. You can also skip through 6 different fan presets via pressing Fn plus escape and additionally 6 performance and fan speed combinations via Fn plus F12. And we really have to talk about the fan speed, noise and temperatures for a bit. It's worth it. Before we start, let me show you this graph in which I compared the performance of the turbo preset, the balanced preset and the silent/eco preset, as well as the gaming capability on battery. The turbo preset runs the fans at max speed, which as you can see here isn't really necessary. The laptop also works well on balanced mode and even the silent mode, which is actually really silent while still providing enough performance for most gaming situations. But if you're okay with slightly higher temperatures, you can also set the fans, let's say to a fixed, not too loud speed, around 55%, and still game with the laptop without throttling. At least I was able to do so on a laptop stand in a room temperature of around 24 degrees Celsius right now. And since you can actually undervolt the RTX 4060, you could even do so with decent temperatures and still decent performance. In this case, I was able to reduce the power usage of the RTX 4060 from around 85 to 55 watt, while only losing 10% in performance, and that's amazing. So you can really tinker around with this fella if that's something you enjoy. The whole cooling system seems to be really good, and in contrast to the cheaper Gigabyte G5, which I've also tested, really deserves the Windforce branding in my opinion. I also have to note that on the highest fan mode, the fan noise gets kinda uncomfortable due to a high-pitched tone. It's not super loud overall, but it's just a bit a high tone. And when the laptop is idling or only used for YouTube, the fans often turn off completely, even on the balanced performance mode. How cool is that? And since we're getting great battery run times, this would be a perfect laptop for university or the library if you're willing to carry around the 3 kg, including the AC adapter. Furthermore, the Gigabyte Control Center offers a real mux switch, which improves the performance a tiny bit by around 3 to 5%. And for my testing, it was activated all the time. You can also freely choose the maximum battery charging level between 60 and 100%, which I've never seen before. I know that a lot of people don't like these laptop pre-installed control centers, but the Gigabyte Control Center really impressed me in a positive way. Though to be fair, in my testing period, it crashed 2 times and had to be restarted. Now let's talk about the performance. Waking up from sleep happens instantly, and booting the laptop until we see the desktop takes around 23 seconds for a fresh system. The Intel i5 12500H with its 4 performance and 8 efficiency cores is neither the newest nor the fastest CPU that Gigabyte could have used for this laptop, but it should be fast enough and sufficient for everyday tasks as well as gaming and even more work-related stuff that needs a faster CPU in general for a few years. And it surely is a budget decision in this case. As a comparison, it's about as fast as a 4-year-old i7 9700K or 9900K desktop CPU, while it even has a much better single-core performance. And with its 12 cores and 16 threads, it really should be good enough for quite a while in most scenarios. Though I'm actually planning on making a video in which I talk about why getting faster CPUs for gaming laptops usually really pays off after like 2 to 4 years. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't already done that. In Cinebench R23, using the turbo mode, it reached a maximum of up to 13,542 points in the multi-core test and 1,649 points in the single-core test. These results will drop slightly to around 12,935 after a few runs, since the turbo mode drops to around 3,800 MHz, I mean the turbo boost. Adding the second RAM stick didn't noticeably change the score. In PCMark 10, which in my opinion is a great free software tool to test your everyday PC speed in terms of surfing, opening apps, video calls, picture editing and much more, it got a score of up to 7,000 points plugged in with the turbo mode activated and almost identical 6,863 points on the much quieter balanced mode and still around 5,589 points on the silent/eco mode. In that case, upgrading the RAM to 2 8GB sticks didn't really change the outcome of the test once more for some reason. The built-in 512GB PCIe Gen 4 SSD was reaching good sequential reading speeds of around 3,300 MB per second and writing speeds of around 2,000 MB per second in AS SSD benchmark. The laptop also offers a second M.2 PCIe Gen 4 slot and no SATA slot. The big 99 Wh battery enables good runtimes. On idle with 20% display brightness and activated Wi-Fi, the laptop only uses around 7.5 watt in total, which resulted in a runtime of 13.2 hours. Watching YouTube at 50% brightness with headphones at 20% loudness, it still only used around 11.3 watt, which resulted in really nice 8.7 hours in total. And even gaming on battery is possible for up to 2 hours or more if you reduce the performance and cap the FPS depending on the game. Though I have to point out, not all games will run okay on battery due to the reduced CPU performance, but some are perfectly playable. When plugged in, the laptop would pull around 160 to 180 watt from the wall while gaming, which is no problem for the included compact 240 watt PSU it comes with. If you're using a 100 watt USB-C charger, the laptop of course won't be able to maintain its full performance. To open up the laptop for upgrading RAM and the SSDs, you'll have to get rid of the 12 screws on the backside of the laptop. Unfortunately, to do so you need a tiny size 6 Torx screwdriver. And even with a magnetic one, I wasn't able to get all screws out of the laptop after releasing them, so I actually used a stronger magnet to help in that case. The 4 screws at the back are smaller than the rest of the screws, so make sure to keep track of them. Once all screws are released, you need to pry open the laptop with the help of a credit card or a pry tool by sliding it alongside this line over here. Once inside, it's pretty easy to insert a second RAM stick, for which in this case I used a very cheap 8GB stick by Crucial with 4800 MHz and a latency of 40 CL. Also using the second M.2 slot is straightforward by using a small Phillips screwdriver. Make sure to first unplug the laptop's battery after opening it, and don't forget to replug it before closing it. Thanks to the dedicated RTX 4060 with its 8GB of VRAM, you can play any existing game out there if you upgrade the RAM to 16GB, since games like The Last of Us won't work with only a single stick of 8GB installed. I compared the 8GB stock configuration versus the 16GB upgrade in 7 games, and as you can see here, the difference isn't actually that big, since we're talking about DDR5, which runs better with only one stick than DDR4 RAM did back in the day. And the 1% lows haven't really been that different either. They more or less have been the same actually. I made a quick video with a side-by-side comparison, which you can check out here, and I will also post the link in the description. I also have to point out that Hogwarts Legacy was unplayable if frame generation and DLSS were turned off due to very heavy stuttering. And as I said before, The Last of Us doesn't even load a save game with only 8GB present. And that will definitely be the case for more and more games in the future. I also have to point out that, in case you haven't heard it yet, that the RTX 4050, 4060 and 4070 mobile don't fully utilize their wattage above around 85 watt in games, no matter the TDP. So getting a laptop with one of these GPUs above 85 watt won't really help you with the performance like at all. I also tried to overclock the RTX 4060, which is pretty safe in that case, since the GPU has a voltage limit and won't use more watt and won't get hotter when doing so. In Cyberpunk 2077, I was able to raise the FPS by around 9% and in Shadow of the Tomb Raider by around 4%. PS, the WASD keys over here don't get very warm, even in longer gaming sessions, only a little bit, but not to a point where it gets uncomfortable. And even undervolting the GPU is possible via the curve optimizer in MSI Afterburner. But to read out the voltage, you would need additional software like Hardware Info. That way, it's possible to run the fans at relatively low 50% and keep the temperatures at bay, as I said before. In this comparison over here, you can see a strong undervolt profile on the left, the stock configuration in the middle, and the 200 MHz GPU core overclock on the right side. All of them running at a relatively low and silent fan speed of around 55%. And as you can see, with the undervolt, it uses 30 watt less, which results in much lower temperatures at these low fan speeds. What you can also see is that the overclock does not run hotter, as it doesn't use more power. So I'm not saying you should overclock, and I don't take any responsibility, but you could actually think about it, I guess. Oh, and I almost forgot, these are the 3D Mark Firestrike and times by results when comparing the 3 performance modes: Turbo, Balanced and Silent. In Blender 3.4.1, I was comparing the NVIDIA RTX 4060 mobile of this laptop with the 85 watt RTX 4050 in a Katana 15 and the RTX 2060 in my Asus TUF 815. Using Blender with the RTX 4060 mobile is absolutely possible and just works fine. Okay, so if you haven't already noticed, I'm quite excited about the Gigabyte AORUS 15 this year. It's a great laptop overall. Of course, it all comes down to the price. But for 1,150 euros, in my case in Europe, this is definitely a recommendation. Of course, it's not perfect, but it's so good in so many aspects that I'd actually like to own it myself, despite the missing numpad and despite the fact that it only sports an Intel i5. Unfortunately, the i7 models are too expensive for my taste as of now. I really have to point out that I'm not getting paid by Gigabyte for this review, and if you have seen my Gigabyte G5 review, you know I'm not exactly biased in a positive way in that case. What really stood out is the cooling system and how good you can configure it, as well as the good screen and build quality and the relatively low price for this version here. And overall, the performance and gaming performance is great and sufficient for years to come if we are aware that the i5 will become a bottleneck after a while in upcoming games, most likely. But this is kind of the budget version, so I guess that's okay. I'd actually have a hard time defining a target audience for this laptop, as it's just really versatile and suitable for basically anybody that also likes gaming on a laptop. Okay, so that's all for today. If you enjoyed this video as much as I did, please consider liking and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more reviews, mobile GPU tests and other stuff. Thanks for watching, see you next time, bye bye and tschüss.